Hi, this is another video of me breaking down track 3 of 7 from my Music from Software album, this time sampling from the Dark Souls 2 original soundtrack. As Dark Souls 2 was a game that I personally didn't enjoy as much as all the other games in the series, I really found it hard to think of a track from the soundtrack that stood out to me or pick one that I really thoroughly enjoyed. So I spent some time flicking through the soundtrack and I ended up going with Sir Alon's theme, but then I actually stopped this halfway through. It wasn't necessarily that it was bad, it was just I kind of didn't know how to continue the beat and how it was all going to tie together. So with that in mind, I actually went back to the soundtrack and ended up finding a track called Firekeepers. So have a listen to this. Much like sampling Gwyn's theme, the track itself is quite spacious and quite simple, and there were some interesting plucks that I wanted to go with from nearer the start of the track. So I chopped them up and put them onto the pads. After toying around with the samples on the pads, I decided to turn the whole sample down by 2 semitones, and I ended up coming up with an arrangement that sounded like this. Once I had this arrangement down, I could already tell that this wasn't going to be that kind of old school boom bap / hip hop kind of sound that I'd usually go for. So instead I went for more of a trap sound. With this in mind, before I put any of my trap drums down, I needed to make sure that I had the right kick and the right 808 combo. Because if I didn't get this right at the start, then the whole track kind of falls apart and fails at the first hurdle. For this, I found a punchy kick and an 808, put them on 2 separate pads, and had the 808 trigger whenever I pressed the kick pad. Now with the 808, I simply softened the attack so it wouldn't clash with the punch of the kick. I added a compressor just to add a bit more punch to the 808 itself. I added some distortion to thicken it, and then I just added some light EQ just to shape the sound to get it sounding the way I wanted, and this is how it turned out. Now that I was happy with the 808, it was simply a case of adding some trap style drums to match it. Now that the drums were in, it was time to add a couple more layers to go alongside the sample. So to add more high end, I went to my plugin presets in the MPC, chose the hype synth and came up with this. Now nothing to me sounds more Dark Souls than a haunting choir in the background, so I decided to find a choir style preset in the hype synth and came up with this sort of backing melody. Now that these two elements were added to the sample, it sounded a lot more full and the track was really coming together the way I wanted it to, but I just wanted to sprinkle a couple of extra things on there as well. So I created a separate track just with a few percussive hits on it, things like a light cowbell, a distant crash and a reverse crash as well. This was just so I could add a bit more anticipation and movement to the beat as it was going along. Now that I was happy with this main arrangement, I decided to go back to the sample and start putting together some new arrangements that I can match all the other elements to. Just while we're on the topic of creating new arrangements, here's one of them that actually didn't make the final cut of the track in the end. I think it's important to show sequences like that because it just shows that there's a lot of trial and error when it comes to beat making. And although you could look at that sequence and say, oh, it could fit here, it could fit there, the whole point of it wasn't really, I didn't get that feeling that it just slotted in quite nicely like all the others. And usually when you get a feeling like that, you should just go with it and just say, no, I can create something different. Let's go back to the drawing board and try and come up with something even better. So now I'd reached the point where I had enough arrangements for me to start putting the whole beat together, but I just needed one more thing, and that was the intro. For this, I kept it very simple. I went straight back to the sample chops, just had them play on their own, but I actually took chops from bank B instead of bank A, so a different part of the sample, and this is how it turned out. So once the intro was added in and I got all my arrangements in order, this would usually be the point where I would start adding a few more effects to a lot of the tracks. But for this, I kind of just enjoyed the way it sounded as it was. So I adjusted some levels, did a light bit of panning here and there, made sure that the drums had that sort of loud, punchy trap sound. And yeah, I was quite happy with it after that. So here's a snippet of how it turned out. So this was actually the last track I put together for this whole album, and it's definitely the most simple in terms of its elements and its arrangements. When I was making it, I really was trying to add a lot more elements to it, but I found that the more I added, the more it kind of muddied the track altogether, and it just ended up sounding cluttered, for lack of a better word. But I actually think it's better for it. The track kind of matches the original sample in terms of it having a lot of space, which means I could put things like the choir underneath, which gives it that really melancholic feel that Dark Souls is known for. Especially Dark Souls 2, because if you don't feel utterly defeated even after beating that game, then you're more of a man than I am. Anyway, thanks for sticking around again and watching this video. The next one I'll be doing is the beat that's sampled off of Bloodborne, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you dig this track, you can go find it on Spotify on the Music from Software album. It's called Preserve the Fire, track 2. And yeah, just thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.